start our recording. You guys are good to go.
Alright, so my name is Vinnie Salazar. I'm interviewing today. I'm a student here, and I'm in the aviation program on the pilot track. And you also went to OE, right?
That's correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about your time here?
Well, I was a student,
Yeah.
as everybody is for a long time, and I didn't know when to quit, so I kept getting additional degrees. But I also got my pilot certificate here,
Yeah.
right there, out there on that field. But then it was an elective rather than a program. So I took the ground school and flight hours, all as an elective.
Mm-hmm. So you actually majored in economics, correct?
That's correct.
Why did you choose to major in economics?
You really want the whole truth?
Yeah.
Okay, well, at my sophomore year, maybe I'd taken a course in economics, my first one, I think. And I was walking down the hall after the finals with my girlfriend at the time, and there was the professor, and I asked him if the grades were posted. He said, well, I want to talk to you. Come into my office. And I thought, this could be bad. So she came with me, my lady friend. He said, you've made the highest grade of any student I've ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, it wasn't that hard. I must be good at this. So that was how I chose economics. My girlfriend was very impressed at the time. But no, I'm serious. That was it. That kind of fell into it thing.
Do you regret your decision to pursue economics at all?
Say what?
Do you regret your decision to pursue economics at all? Would you rather have pursued aviation as a career?
Well, you look back and none of it makes that much sense. It's not like you can pick a path, or at least I didn't, and stay on at aviation or economics. I found this about economics. By the time you get to your doctorate level, and I didn't have good sense to quit. The textbook would say, therefore, and then formulas. At the end, and the next page would be formulas, and that is the conclusion. And I thought, I don't like that. So smart people figure out where they're going before they get there, and I wasn't one of those.
I mean, none of us can see the future.
No.
But why did you end up choosing to work with the FAA?
I was already working in Washington, D.C., and the FAA had a job, the National Training Systems Manager in Washington, D.C. at FAA headquarters. And so I applied for that, and when I interviewed, I told him, I said, you really don't want me. There's this guy who works for me exactly what you're looking for. And I think what I learned is if you try and get everybody to get somebody else, they decide they want you. So that's my first job in the FAA, was the National Training Systems Manager in Washington, D.C.
And that was in 1997, right?
Oh, you're going to ask dates? That was in the late 1970s, yeah.
Right. So were you working with the FAA whenever the Airline Regulation Act passed?
Probably not. I don't know.
It's 1978.
That would have been borderline. But my first job after Washington, D.C., I came to the Aeronautical Center as program manager to develop some national programs in computer-based. And they ate my lunch. I mean, that's all I did. It was terrible, terrible hard work. And after that, I was no promotion, but I was posted to London, to the embassy there, the Scandinavian countries, and the UK, and Ireland, and Iceland. The Republic of Ireland, let me be specific, in Iceland. And boy, that woke me up to a whole new world.
Is that why you chose to get to the international branches of the FAA?
No, I was being asked to go to the Department of Transportation in Washington, D.C. to be a program manager for another one of these programs, and I didn't have another one left in me. I really didn't. So when the opportunity came to go to London, I thought, boy, that's completely out of my wheelhouse. That could be wonderful. It could be bad. Who knows? So I went, and toward the end of the first year, we had Pan Am 103.
Yeah.
And that took a year of my life, and worked with the Presidential Commission on that. And then after 4 years in London, which was about the max, I was promoted to go to Brussels as the director for Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and former Soviet Union. And then it was a whole new world. I mean, you had the fall of the wall, the breakup of the Soviet Union, unification of Germany. Man, I was in Harare, Zimbabwe, when Mandela was inaugurated president. South Africa. I mean, it was just so they kept asking me to stay, and I kept staying for a while.
That must have been a really exciting career.
Say what?
That must have been a really exciting career.
Well, I think the best part was the very end. When I decided to go to Alaska, it was not a promotion, but I thought I was already eligible to retire if I needed to.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, Alaska, that sounds like fishing and adventure and airplanes. And that was the most meaningful job I think I ever had up there.
Mm-hmm.
Because the line of sight for what you were doing and the impact on people was direct.
Yeah.
And also, NHTSA, the National Transportation Safety Administration, did a study, and during the decade of the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
10 years, in Alaska, they averaged an airplane accident every other day for 10 years.
Wow.
A fatality every 9 days for 10 years.
Wow, that's a lot for aviation.
Oh, that's a lot for anywhere. If that were happening in Virginia, there would be a whole new deal.
Mm-hmm.
But so that was the stage setting, and we had a senator who was the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Ted Stevens, and I would ask for money for a space-based technology demonstration, and I asked for $3 million, and it'd be cut down to $500,000, and Stevens would write $11 million.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got to do a lot of things that really changed the face of aviation in Alaska.
So, what would you say is the FAA's most important job in all of these different projects that you mentioned?
I think it's safety. If you're not making it safe, you're in the wrong business.
Makes sense. You also worked in that after that Pan Am flight was bombed. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, that was a tough time.
That which makes sense.
Too much.
Which makes sense.
Yeah, I think. Well, at that point, the FAA had security responsibility for the last point of departure airplane from anywhere in the world that was coming to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
After Pan Am 103, the Transportation Safety Administration was created, and FAA abandoned, or it was moved from the FAA portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where aviation security went. I think aviation security was almost an impossible task to start with.
Yeah, because when aviation was a new industry, you had no basis of what to expect since it was so new.
I mean, we had, like in Pan Am 103, that the airplane, the bad suitcase with the radio that had the bomb in it started out in Libya. It went to Frankfurt, but from it had already in final destination was the United States, so it had already been screened before it ever went to Frankfurt.
Mm-hmm.
So it was treated as an inline thing, and then went right through that. So you just do too many dependencies.
Yeah, forgive me if I'm wrong, but didn't the bomb detector they were using to scan bags go off, but they just ignored it or thought it was like didn't they think it was like some sort of error in the system and not an actual threat?
No.
Okay.
No. Whatever the initial screening was done, Lebanon, it was done with the idea that it wasn't going to catch this because they wanted the bomb to make it all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
I think what didn't happen, according to the bad guy plan, was that it was supposed to wait until it got to elevation and over the water and then blow up. And then you wouldn't have any of these traces or anything. Instead, it blew up over Scotland in pieces, and all of that could be retrieved and a determination made.
Were you actually, how involved with the actual investigation were you?
I was not actively, in other words, we sent a team over.
Yeah.
The FAA does not determine the cause of accidents or safety issues, or the NTSB does that, the National. And so we provide all of the expertise, really, if you want to know the truth. The FAA provides the go-to team that makes it happen. And we had a guy named Walt Korsgaard at the time who had 2 hearing aids, one in each ear. Mm-hmm. He was the bomb guy, which you probably feared. Mm-hmm. And he was the #1 expert in bombs worldwide. Nobody could touch him. And he found a small piece of metal that had an imprint on it that was the smoking gun, so to speak, and that was determined it was a bomb. And so what was happening, they were reporting to me in the embassy in London, and I was sending the reports. And the ambassador in each country has what they call a country team, which is composed of about 5 members, and that's the kind of go-to team. And I was one of those, and so one of those 5. So I had a boss in the sense of, if you don't please the ambassador, you don't stay. And
Yeah.
at the same time, if you don't please your boss, and back in the U.S. of A., you don't stay. So it was a challenge.
Yeah.
I like your hat.
Thank you. I'm only wearing it to appease one person.
There you go. Well, he's the tallest one in the room. I'd kind of wear it too.
Yeah. I just have to listen to him.
Yeah.
So, you were also working with the FAA during the double dip recession, right? In the 80s?
Yeah, but keep in mind, but during the 80s, I was, depending on what part of the 80s you're talking about, I was either in London or in Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
And I was much more concerned with what was happening in Africa and the Middle East and in the former Soviet Union than I was back here.
Makes sense. So, out of all the different topics you talked about, I think the one that most concerns international affairs is 9/11. You were still working with the FAA during 9/11, right?
I was in Alaska at that time.
Did you see the effects of 9/11 in Alaska? Like, what was that like?
Well, I had a 24/365 ops center that, and every morning when I would come in, and I'd come in early, I would have the videos of all of the TV programs that touched on aviation and a printout of everything that was going on and so forth. And I got a call really early that said that, a plane had crashed in Washington, D.C. I got up and came in, and then we had the second one, and that determined we had a whole new situation. So as the part of the federal building in downtown Anchorage, we were the primary tenant, so I was the voice to decide whether it was open or closed. So I shut down the building with the exception of essential people and doubled the guards and stuff like that. And I had a scramble phone in my house, and the commanding general of the 11th Air Force had one. And so we were talking back and forth. The next exciting thing, we had an inbound China Air 747, and the pilot had pushed the wrong button, and it indicated he did not have freedom of action. So we, the FAA, diverted it to Whitehorse in Canada, and it declared a fuel emergency immediately. And 2 F-15s were, scrambled to make sure it went the way it was supposed to. So there was lots of stuff going on.
Yeah. Did you see, what was it like in the aftermath of 9/11, after the initial shock happened? Did you see any changes there?
Yeah, I laugh because we had all of these people that were out in hunting and fishing villages and expecting their float plane to pick them up or bring food, and none of those planes could fly anywhere because we grounded everything. So these people were out in the middle of nowhere. They had no communication. They just look, and there's no plane over the horizon to pick them up. What's going on? So our situation was a little different than most of the lower 48. And to shorten the long story, we were the first to fly. We got that permission. And the Canadians, who were great, even though we had the first to fly opportunity and did, when a single engine airplane approached the Canadian border, it had to land on a road and be towed through their custom immigration thing before they let it take off and fly on the other side. It's things that seemed crazy, but if the situation was such that you didn't know what was crazy and what wasn't.
Yeah, because it was way out of left field, so to speak.
Yeah.
And similarly speaking, why is there a separate branch of the FAA just for Alaska?
Why is there a separate what?
Separate, branch or sector of the FAA just for Alaska.
Well, I think the FAA, the way it was organized, I think it's probably close to the same thing, has regions, and each region has a regional administrator, and there's an Alaskan region, there's a Southwest region that includes Texas, for gosh sakes, and so forth. So the Alaskan region is there for lots of good purposes, one of which is that we border our airspace with that of Russia and Canada, and in fact, this is interesting. If you take a map of Alaska and overlay it over the 48 below, Alaska is the northernmost, southernmost, westernmost, easternmost state. It covers everything in one way or another. But the other thing is that was the only means. It was like if you grew up with a tractor in your backyard, you'd probably drive the tractor. That's what was happening in Alaska. People were dependent on little airplanes.
Yeah.
And they would fly. You know, if grandmother was sick and there was no option, you put her in the plane and took off.
Yeah, because it's not like Alaska's very drivable with a lot of snow and ice and mountains everywhere.
Yes, it is. In fact, Alaska is very terrain bound. That's one of the problems with using radar or, you know, we developed a program during the same time we were doing the space-based stuff.
Yeah.
Weather cameras is what we call them. We would install weather cameras that you could pick up here now. And that was the beginning of people being able to actually see what was going on rather than, for instance, in Barrow, Alaska, we had a weather reporting system.
Mm-hmm.
And in the winter, it would say it was 32 degrees and foggy, when it was really a minus 30 and clear. And that was because the post office was closed. Everybody would leave the motor running, and all of the exhaust would go and cover it up. So once we got a little smarter, we started installing these cameras, which took off. I mean, there are hundreds of them right now in many countries. But the guy I used to go fishing with up there, his wife would not let us start the engine of the airplane until she checked the weather camera of the places we were going.
Huh.
So you had adult supervision, which was good.
Yeah, and after your time in Alaska, you retired in 2006, right?
Yes, after my time in Alaska, I retired, yes.
So what influenced you to leave that position and retire?
Well, I'd say this: I should have quit a year earlier. I kind of worn myself down, but it was just the right thing. It was the right time, and my wife was very ill.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, and I know you weren't working at this time, but did you notice any effects on aviation during the 2008 recession?
During the what?
The 2008 recession, the housing crisis?
The what? The 2008 what crisis?
The housing crisis.
Oh.
The Great Recession of 2008.
Not really, because I was caught up in other things. I did one smart thing, and that is when I retired, I decided I would not do anything that was financially compensated unless I was willing to give half the money in taxes, the other half to charity. So you did it from here only. And that was a great decision. Because the only thing I've done are the things that I had passion for.
Yeah. Which makes a lot of sense. Is there anything you want to say to us as students who will be involved with the aviation industry someday?
Well, I guess I would say this, that it's not a status quo. I mean, when you pick that field, you're going to be at the cutting edge of technology. You're going to be impacted by every international and local event that could be harmful to aviation or the airports or the runways so it's a roller coaster, but it needs people who are willing to take the ride.
And I think that is all we have for you today.
Oh, well, that's good. It wasn't very tough. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you for your time.
She was a lot nicer than I thought.